It's a new night on Deep Space Nine, and Sisko's dinner party is a bust. Everybody's too concerned with recent developments to enjoy themselves, reports of another missing ship at the Cardigan border not helping. All of Sisko's attempts to change the subject just make things worse, so we all admit defeat and bugger off home. Sisko even tells Jake and Eggnog to leave the tidying up so he can be alone, then receives news that Kai Sin, the Delphic douchebag, will be arriving tomorrow to see him, as the cherry on top. Jake's concerned about his dad. It's an officer's job to tend the morale of those under their command, which is all well and good unless you're at the top of the pyramid. What he needs is cheering up, so it's handy Quark is holding an auction of stuff found on a wrecked freighter. The contents are largely trash, but then such things are subjective, and one of the items mentioned is a 20th century human baseball card. Jake thinks that's just the thing, which is a problem when it's in an auction and humans don't really do the whole money thing these days. We do the whole emotional blackmail thing though, and he convinces Eggnog to use his money instead as a thank you for getting him into Starfleet Academy. Sisko needs all the cheering up he can get. A visit from Kai Sin is rarely a pleasant experience, and this one comes with worse news than normal. After some dancing around, she tells him she's here to meet someone from the Dominion who requested to see her. Whether she's turning to Sisko for an ally or someone to blame if it all goes to shit is another matter. To the auction we go, and the item we want is part of a group lot stored in a chest. I'm sure it's just coincidence that lumping a variety of pieces together increases the likelihood of competitive bidding, which is precisely what happens. Jake and Eggnog are outbid by a significant margin, and by someone we know. Why, it's our old friend unnamed guy called Durst from Voyager, he of the removable face, and he's looking pretty good for having died 2 years ago and 70,000 light-years away. Anywho, losing the auction is a setback, sure, but not a fatal one, thinks Jake. He's certain this is what his dad needs, and he's not going to let a little thing like somebody else owning it stop him. That's why we try to catch up with the guy later on the promenade and make an offer. It doesn't quite go to plan, though, and he instead accuses us of being representatives for a nameless authority, before scarpering. Our Dominion representative has arrived, and it's fifth Uncle Wayoon, the creepy. The oily salesman pitch is stopped in its tracks by Sisko, just flat-out calling him an asshole. Not that fifth Uncle Wayoon minds. If his meeting with Kai Sin, the Delphic douchebag, goes well, he'll be seeing enough of Sisko to work on their relationship. There's a thawing of moods elsewhere, too, as Jake and Eggnog have received a message from the auction winner, and he wants to see them. We arrive at some quarters filled with items that probably aren't approved, a fact likely connected with the former unnamed guy called Durst, now being known as unnamed doctor called Durst. The oddness continues with his offer. He doesn't want money, but rather a list of items, believing Jake and Eggnog are better connected for finding them. The list is an odd one, though, and that causes Eggnog to ask about their use. Long story short, unnamed doctor called Durst is cocking about with immortality, perhaps after his twin's unfortunate experience in the Delta Quadrant a couple of years back. He needs these items to make his gizmo work, the one that'll cure death by keeping the body's cells sufficiently happy. A quick conference between Jake and Eggnog has them conclude the guy's completely out of his fucking tree, but he does have something they want, so they agree to his list. First stop is O'Brien for a power cell. Jake doesn't want to tell him what it's for, though, believing any breach of secrecy would result in a rumour getting back to his dad, and this makes O'Brien somewhat disinclined to put too much effort into finding one. Part of that is because he's busy due to one of his crew calling in sick. He'd far rather be in a holosuite right now, and that smells like opportunity to Eggnog. He and Jake will do this job instead, so O'Brien can go have some fun. All O'Brien has to do is find that power cell on the way. Bashir's a little more difficult to satisfy. He doesn't want time off, instead happy to be working on a research project, but he has been missing the stuffed bear he's had since he was a kid. It was loaned to Lita, presumably while they were still together, and never brought back. Return that, and we can have the special medicine goo we want. It's not really breaking and entering if it's just to retrieve property, right? While they're off committing crimes, Kai Sin, the Delphic douchebag, is meeting with Sisko again. Fifth Uncle Weyoun, the creepy, has told her the Dominion wants a non-aggression pact with Bajor. That would essentially isolate Bajor from the Federation and its allies, something Kai Sin points out Sisko already did by telling her to delay membership back when he was all prophetic and shit. Even she can see this would be poorly received though, which is probably why she's asking for guidance from the emissary. For his part, Sisko advises delaying any decision. He doesn't know what's coming, but thinks it's near. That's good enough for her, any inaction now firmly placed at someone else's feet, and she buggers off after making it clear that it was his call. Jake's making the first delivery of random shite to unnamed doctor called Durst. Part of it goes into a gizmo that powers up and hums, all of which is overheard by Fifth Uncle Weyoun the Creepy in the quarters directly above. The jobs continue, though not smoothly. Jake trying to rewrite a speech for Kira while Eggnog cleans up some of Worf's opera is a poor match, but they push through it and deliver the rest of the items on the list. Well, they try to, but unnamed doctor called Durst isn't responding. Understandable, really, when he's no longer here, and neither is his equipment. Odo can find no reference to an unnamed doctor called Durst, and hearing about the magic cell-pleasuring gizmo makes him assume the whole thing is a wind-up and throw them out. That puts them on the promenade just as Kai Sin is talking to a Vedek, one that was bidding on the same lot as they did because of a Bajoran artifact. Jake's familiar with what an absolute bastard Kai Sin is, so it's not that much of a stretch to imagine she had unnamed doctor called Durst kidnapped so she could nick the artifact. Eggnog's more than a touch skeptical, but the sunk cost fallacy is in full effect now, so let's see it through. Kai Sin stalling Fifth Uncle Weyoun and politely making it very clear she doesn't much care for him, so fair play to her on that score. He leaves before she runs into Jake and Eggnog, who want to chat. You could generously say it has mixed results, hence them being in Sisko's office and getting a new arse torn for suggesting the religious head of Bajor had done a bit of the old kidnapping. Revealing the truth would mean spoiling the surprise, so Jake instead tells him it was because he and Eggnog were shit-faced. That earns them a confinement to quarters, which is a legally nebulous area when Jake's not in Starfleet, but let's ignore that for now. It doesn't matter anyway, as while they're on the way home, they get teleported away. We're on the Jem'Hadar ship, and Fifth Uncle Weyoun the Creepy is interrogating them. He's seen them associating with unnamed doctor called Durst and wants to know everything. He doesn't believe Jake when he's told it's just about a baseball card for his dad, not when they've been observed with senior staff and helping unnamed doctor called Durst with experiments right below the quarters he was assigned. That's why Fifth Uncle Weyoun also nabbed unnamed doctor called Durst as well. Jake's a professional bullshitter, so instead spins a yarn about being a member of Starfleet intelligence, and the human on the baseball card a potential time traveller, him having no official record before yesterday. Such a story is enough to convince Fifth Uncle Weyoun that the first explanation was true. Even better, learning that unnamed doctor called Durst is working on immortality is right up the alley of someone who's already been rebooted 4 times, and they start to chat about it. Jake and Eggnog are free to go, but not before one last exchange with Fifth Uncle Weyoun the Creepy. Deep Space Nine has undergone a transformation. More accurately, its inhabitants have. O'Brien has had his time relaxing on the holosuite. Bashir has been reunited with his childhood friend. Okay, Lita's been robbed to make that happen, but eggs and omelettes. Kira's speech is well received. Dax doesn't get anything, but that's her own fault for not being in the episode. Worf is listening to remastered opera. Even Fifth Uncle Weyoun the Creepy and unnamed doctor called Durst are much happier. And Captain Benjamin Sisko now has an old piece of cardboard that came with some chewing gum to look at, so we'll leave him to appreciate the gift and the effort behind it until the next adventure. The penultimate episode of Season 5 then, and an unusual one. All the important plot arc stuff is shoved to the side and made incidental. The main thrust is the adventure of Jake and Eggnog, and if it all felt a bit familiar as you were watching, that's because this isn't the first MMO fetch quest Deep Space Nine has given them. We had what amounts to essentially the same idea in the Season 1 episode Progress, but used there as a B-plot. All of which leaves me somewhat conflicted as to how to feel about the story. In a way, I confess I find it disappointing. Not for the reuse of a plot, though that itself is a negative, but because the repetition after such a long gap serves to undermine multiple years of growth for the characters. These aren't children anymore. Eggnog is at Starfleet Academy. Jake is working on a writing career after gathering the courage to tell his father that he didn't want to do the same as him. They've become more than they were, and we joined them for the ride. But then, maybe that's an overreaction on my part. There are some aspects you could consider tying into those developments. Jake's use of fiction is a nod to the literary aspect of his character, and his willingness to engage in shenanigans greater than it once was, perhaps as a result of Eggnog's influence. Similarly, Eggnog is the one to try and dial things back and call a halt. He's the voice of reason when Jake gets carried away, possibly something drilled into him by the Academy. On paper, you could point at parts of this and argue they display the growth that I so regularly promote in these analyses. So why does it leave me feeling cold? Perhaps it's not even about Jake and Eggnog. Perhaps seeing progress of the overall plot, those things we've been building for years, get nudged to one side is what feels off. We're given things which have a bearing on slow-burn stories, but incidentally and from a distance. After significant consideration, I suspect it may be a combination of the two. The deliberate absurdity of the A-plot sits poorly with Jake and Eggnog as they are now, and does a regrettably good job of neutralizing the seriousness that the rest of the episode is trying to tell us about. It's difficult to give the potential subjugation of Bajor the consideration it deserves in an episode that also talks about a machine that cures death through cell-gasms. For me, the dissonance between those two threads unravels both. As an episode, then, I'd argue the whole is less than the sum of its parts, so let's deconstruct it and look at those parts in isolation. Starting at the start, things along the Cardigan border are still grim. The missing Klingon ship of 4 episodes ago was not the last, meaning the Jem'Hadar, or their Cardigan mates, are still being trigger-happy. Of more interest, though, is that Bashir voices frustration at the lack of action from Starfleet Command. This is something we've been saying for a while on a number of topics. Ignoring the seriousness of the demilitarized zone situation is the main one, but refusing to do anything other than send harshly worded letters to the Cardigans after multiple shenanigans has featured on the channel as well. Given that baseline, well, why wouldn't the Jem'Hadar kaboom our ships? Getting told off 20 times is a significantly more appealing prospect than facing 20 vessels in a fair fight. Elsewhere, we had 5th Uncle Weyoun the Creepy popping over for a chat with Kai Sin, the Delphic douchebag. This is interesting for a couple of reasons. We've previously only seen this incarnation of Uncle Weyoun the Creepy attached to Seagull Dukat, the possible implication being that he was the intermediary for that particular relationship. Seeing him here and discussing Bajor suggests this is not the case. Does this mean 5th Uncle Weyoun's position in the Alpha Quadrant is higher than an ambassador to one species? Could he instead be an expert on negotiations with potential vassals, and other Vorta come to take over the job afterwards? The real reason, of course, is because Jeffrey Combs is excellent in the role, but it's fun to consider potential implications. And speaking of superb bastards, let's end by looking at the other side of the Bajor negotiations with Kai Sin, the Delphic douchebag. I sometimes have a read about episodes before I write an analysis, and it surprised me to see this one described as a thawing of relations between her and Sisko. To my mind, any deference to the emissary has nothing to do with respect, and everything to do with covering her own arse. Every time she's done so, it's been clearly phrased as following his wishes. That way, if it all goes pear-shaped, she can point the finger towards Sisko and send the mob in his direction. She's fully aware that she's out of her depth, just as she was with the Cardigan peace negotiations, so she's making sure she has someone to stand on if the waters start to rise. To look at the polite civility she's affording him now and conclude this indicates respect is, to me, missing the point. Drawing attention to the fine decoration all along the handle of a dagger doesn't make the edge at your throat any less sharp. End of episode.
So, yammock sauce is the solution then?
Correct. It should replace Leola root nicely.
What a faff for an obvious answer. Are we getting some anyway?
Already done. I arranged for 10,001 wrappages of yammock sauce to be delivered to the station.
Bit of an odd number.
Are you trying to make a mathematics joke?
No, but let's say yes so the viewers think it's more clever than it is.
Sigh. Anyway, it's 10,001 because I've nicked one of them and left the others.
Hold up, why are we doing that?
Well, they wouldn't deliver just one, and I didn't want to pay for more, so I ordered them from Quark's computer. When they're inevitably found by security, he'll take the blame.
Good lad, serves him right for that dodgy video he sold us. Now for the hard part.
Figuring all this out wasn't the hard part?
No, son, the hard part is eating it. Oof.